Recording live from the Lucky Number 7 Lounge, this is Dine, Drink Vegas, the podcast by and for everybody stuck at home, but wishing they were in the land of neon lights and bad decisions. I'm your host, John, aka the Baller on a Budget, and you have found episode 47, Customer Service. Also, we're going to bring you the Vegas news that we find interesting, and we're going to fill you in about our drink of the day. But before we could do any of that, it's time to bring in the founder of Dine Drink Travel himself. Yes, the high roller formerly of the High Plains, the leader in the luxury lounge, the king of comps, the Alabama slammer, the man who is always waiting on that limo to take him away to a luxury Las Vegas resort. Of course, I mean Bill. Hey, Bill, deja vu.
Deja vu indeed. So listeners, we are recording this on Thursday, July the 31st, release on Friday, August the 1st. But we tried to record it last night, but it turns out, my internet did the way that public infrastructure in Alabama will be and will do. But that's okay because John lives in Texas where public infrastructure has never, ever failed.
We have a lot of infrastructure problem, but the one thing that works is the internet because the crypto bros pretty much run this state now. And it's all the money goes to the crypto bros and all the praise goes to the politicians.
Do you know what works really well here in Alabama, John? What works really well here in Alabama is the heating when winter storms hit. How's Texas been lately?
What grid? We don't. Just because we make the energy doesn't mean that we know how to handle the energy. It's just not, we're in the production, not the maintenance into things. All right. Speaking of production, Bill, let's jump into the drink of the day. So this is now our second attempt at making a classic Caribbean cocktail called the corn and oil. Now, the corn and oil is often associated with tiki culture, but it actually predates the tiki scene. The history of the drink is murky, but best case scenario is it seems to come from Barbados. And here are the ingredients. 2 ounces of either a blackstrap rum or an aged rum, preferably from Barbados. 1/2 ounce of falernum, and we're going to have some things to say about falernum in a second. 1/2 ounce of lime juice, freshly squeezed, please, none of that bottled junk. 3 dashes of Angostura bitters, or as Bill will tell you, for me, a lot more than that. And then you garnish with a lime wedge. Now, the construction here is where we really get off the rails. Normally with anything with a citrus juice, I tell you it's got to be shaken. But corn and oil is built in your glass. In a rocks glass, you could do it one of 2 ways. You could put everything in, stir it up, add your ice, and go to town. Or you could put all the ingredients in except the rum, stir them up, add your ice, and then float the rum on top, and you get this lovely bi-layer thing. But it only works if you do have a really dark blackstrap molasses rum, which is kind of hard to source. So, Bill, let's talk about how you and I made this drink because we made some adjustments on the rum and the falernum. Let's start with rum. What did you go with?
I went with an aged Appleton Estates rum for a couple of reasons. One, I already own like 5 rums in this house, and I just didn't want to buy another one just to make this drink. But 2, I'm not sure that the local liquor stores could find Barbados on a map. I don't know that we've got any kind of blackstrap rum. And Jamaica was as close as I could get. Most of the rums I keep in this house are from either Nicaragua or from Puerto Rico, both places that I've been to, both places that I've enjoyed very much. So I got this Jamaican rum for the cocktails on this show. It's one I enjoy very much, but that's what I had to go with because while Alabama is lovely as a place to live, the state liquor stores are not. They are quite limited. What rum did you go with, John?
So I've got Hamilton Distilling's Beachcomber Berry Zombie Blend, and this is a mixture of different Caribbean rums. I think there's some Barbados rum in here. Not 100% sure. Based on the name, it's really built, for the zombie cocktail, also for the jet pilot and other tiki drinks. but it's a really solid rum for any mixing purpose. But tonight, and this is where I zagged from last night, in addition to my 2 ounces of rum, I added about a quarter teaspoon of blackstrap molasses that I mixed in with the rum before the other ingredients. And I got to say, a little bit of molasses and this particular rum really brought an element that was lacking in the first recording. So that's variation number 1 we did. And by the way, we're not alone in that. Lots of bartenders don't use blackstrap rum. Go ahead, Bill.
And I apologize. So I also made a variation from the version we made last night. My version I made tonight is much more lime forward than the recipe calls for. Like the recipe calls for leaving in like just essentially a lime slice. I left in half a lime after I squeezed it in. And actually, John, have we given our listeners what the actual recipe is for this dang thing yet?
Yeah, I read it. I did the rundown a minute ago.
Okay, no, fair. Not that I don't pay attention to every word you say, but
we've been pre-gaming and talking about some other things off mic. So we might have had quite a bit of rum by this point in the evening. The other thing we got to talk about is the falernum. Now, listeners, this is a drink that hails back to the late 1800s, early 1900s in the Caribbean. Falernum recipes are all over the map. So there's a commercial product called Velvet Falernum, which has a little bit of alcohol in it. That's most commonly available in liquor stores if your liquor store carries a falernum. But falernum recipes and falernum products are all over the map, from just a syrup all the way to falernums that are mixed with like 151 proof Jamaican rum. So there's no one set approach to falernum. Now, Bill and I both made homemade falernums based on some online recipes. And I do feel like with mine initially, it wasn't sweet enough. So last night I had to keep adding more sweetener. I corrected that tonight. I also added a little bit more ginger in the form of Bitter Cube Jamaican Bitters number 1 to mine to balance it out. But I will say that if you go into a bar that has this on the menu, not only are you going to get a different drink based on the rum, every bar might have a different falernum. If you're just at a standard commercial bar, it's going to be John Taylor's Velvet Falernum. But if you go into a really high-end tiki joint, they probably have something they mixed up themselves, and it may vary wildly from the next tiki joint down the road or the next town over. So I don't think there's a really standard approach here. But I got to say, Bill, we've been tweaking this throughout the week. I like what I'm drinking tonight.
So I like what I'm drinking too. The problem is this is episode 47, which means this is roughly the 47th cocktail we've made. And of those 47, it's not high enough up my list for me to want to make it a lot of times again. It's good. It just doesn't crack like that top 5 or 10 list. It's better than average without being all the way up at the top. But I kind of enjoyed the falernum. Like, it was a pain in the butt to make, but I enjoyed that. I think what makes this drink better than the one I made yesterday, though, and the ones I made earlier in the week, is it needs more lime, and the lime helps. Now, my guess is you're correct. Like, the blackstrap rum or adding the blackstrap molasses would have worked. That's not a choice I had. So I went with over-liming it. Yeah, that worked in my case.
You're in Alabama and you can't get molasses?
I assume you could, probably. Whatever. I don't have molasses in my house right now. It would take up space that I'm using for bacon.
Also, it's really strange. The only part of the mold we harvest for food is the ass. Okay.
And that's why we can be friends.
Yeah. On that note, let's move into our feature story. So, several episodes ago, we talked about layoffs at MGM, particularly with concierges, but also with bellhops and some phone center employees. And what that meant was that the remaining customer service staff at MGM properties, a lot of the call service work was being pushed into the resorts to the front desk employees answering phones in the resorts. And those same front desk employees are now picking up duties that used to be done by bellhops and concierges. And we had the discussion in an episode previously, was this going to hurt customer service at MGM properties? At the time, I argue that because so many of the basic things you do when you're booking a hotel, changing a booking on the hotel, or even buying show tickets or making dinner reservations can all be automated on the website or the app, and most customers are doing that, I did not think these layoffs were going to have a big negative consequence on the customer service experience. But, and this is just anecdotal evidence, it turns out Bill has a sad tale of woe to tell you listeners that may contradict my earlier assumption. So Bill, with no further ado, rant mode engaged.
I thank you so much, and I will try to stop myself before we run out of recording time. So, you and I and about 3 other buddies are going to the W, the hotel that you formerly known as the Delano, for Labor Day. And traditionally for this trip, me and our buddy Mike wind up having a 2-bedroom suite. What I had originally booked for Mike and I was 2 different 1-bedroom suites with connecting rooms. And you and I have been talking about how there's great deals to be had in Vegas, so I decided to price out what it would cost to replace our 2 1-bedroom suites with 1 2-bedroom suite. Unfortunately, the way that M Life Rewards works, is that meant I had to cancel my existing deal to price out the new one. It turns out the 2-bedroom suite was going to cost more, was actually going to be less space, so I decided to go back to my original room. Unfortunately, the original deal was gone, and I was going to have to pay another $200 or $300. Now, Rachel, my wife, if you're listening to this, sweetheart, it's important for you to know that over the 20 years or so I've been going to Vegas, I spent a total of $3.17. So this is the first time I've ever spent $200 on anything ever, I promise, ever. So I was going to have to spend $200 or $300 additional bucks to rebook the room I originally had. And to be clear, that's not a legal or an ethics problem on the part of M Life Rewards, because they've at that point always given me the things that they promised me. That's extraordinarily poor customer service, because a customer should be able to price out what an alternative room type would cost without losing the deal they already have. So does that make sense so far, John?
Yes. Yeah, it does to me. I'm tracking so far.
All right, cool. So at this point in this story, I'm still in a reasonably good mood because I get to go to Vegas with my buddies. And, I've only spent $3.17 in Vegas ever in my whole life. So, it's going to be fine. And it's mid-June, and I spent about an hour a day for 4 different days trying to book the new deal. I could clearly see what they said they were going to charge me. But the MLife website, it just wouldn't let me actually book a hotel room. And that meant I had to call in. So again, to be clear, at this point, you still don't have a legal ethical sort of problem on the price or on the part of MLife. It's just that it shouldn't be that hard to give MLife my money. And unfortunately, you and our other friends are at this hotel, so it's not like I could change hotels. So I'm now having to spend hours and hours, still haven't booked a room, and I've got to call in, which I hate doing. But that's why they have phone agents, and I think that's where we pick up with our previous story, where, John, you remember when you said how firing all those customer service people wasn't going to wind up being a big problem, how that was a thing you said?
I did in fact say that might be the case. You're going to tell me I'm wrong.
I would never do that.
Oops.
I'm just going to say that you were less completely correct than you might prefer to have been. So, and this is where the customer service failings became a real problem. So I called in, and I was quoted the same price I could see on the website. So great. On the scale of Vegas things, $200-300 isn't a huge deal, and I agreed to the new price. The agent took my payment. She had my American Express card. She charged me for the first room. Then, and to be clear, this is after she agreed to a price, after she'd already taken payment on one of the rooms. She said, oops, the second room is no longer available, and I would have to pay roughly an additional $800 to get the second room. And John, and the story, by the way, gets worse after this. But I just can't get my head around this. So, John, I know that you're willing to tell me when I'm wrong because I've seen it happen before, the once or twice I've ever been wrong. But it makes sense that when somebody quotes you a price and you're in the process of paying it, you ought to be allowed to pay that price. I mean, right?
I believe that is actually the law in all 50 states. I've never looked it up in Nevada, but I've lived in several states, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, they're obligated to honor a quoted price.
Yeah, no, so that was just obscene. They refused to honor the price they had quoted because their web infrastructure or something had gotten that bad. But I still, because I've done a lot of business with MLive for a couple of decades now, with whatever name MLive was called in whatever year we're talking about. So I, at that point, still want to assume that they're acting in good faith and simply weren't, they had some sort of a technical back-end problem. Also, I kind of had to be at the hotel because that's where you and all of our other friends are. So on June the 20th, I physically emailed MLive customer service. And they received the letter because I tracked it. Because at this point, I'm starting to be pissed off. They received the letter at 5:24 a.m. on June the 24th. It is now July the 31st, so it is well over a month later. They never responded, and I can only think of two reasons for that, John. One of those is that they're acting in bad faith and they simply don't care. The other of those is that they have so few people working that they can't respond. John, am I missing anything on the menu of options about why they might not have responded to that letter?
No, I think it's one or the other, and either way, it's not fair to you as a customer. And at this point, this is one of the problems we get down to. Sure, you could go nuclear, report them to the attorney general of their state, file a Better Business Bureau complaint, probably ruin your relationship with MGM. The problem is, we like Vegas. We create a lot of Vegas content, and you don't want to burn your bridge at one of the largest MGM resort providers. Not only that, we like these properties quite a bit. So your choices are pretty limited. Number one, you could just take it. Number two, you can go nuclear, but risk not being welcomed back as an MGM customer, or at least having it in your file that somehow you're a Karen because they messed up. I did think about number three after we did the dress rehearsal for this last night. You could just cancel the second room and tell Mike to book his own dang room and see what happens on that end. And then good luck to Mike. You're not in a good position.
No, that would be, except this is the space we always use this is football weekend. That's the space we always use for it. But because I didn't wish to go nuclear, before I started complaining about it here on the podcast, I actually took one more step. So we're recording this on Thursday, July the 31st. So on Sunday, whenever that would have been, roughly the 27th. But on Sunday, I sent them an email. I sent it on Sunday at 3:53 p.m. I know they received it because I got an auto response. But as of Thursday, so more than 4 days later, they haven't bothered responding to the email. So folks, let me recap what happened. I had agreed to a price. They gave me a price. I wanted to see what an alternative room type would cost, which meant having to cancel the first deal. The new deal wasn't worth it. Couldn't get the first deal back. It then took me several hours on the computer to try to book the new price. Couldn't do that. Called them on the phone. They quoted me that price. Wouldn't honor that price. After they'd started to take my money, then they didn't answer a letter. Then they didn't answer an email. Y'all, the charitable explanation here is that they have so few people working for them that they just can't answer the messages. The uncharitable explanation is that they don't care to. And to be clear, it's not like I'm some weird lawyer suing them for millions and millions of dollars. What I want is the price they agreed to. And to be clear, by the price they agreed to, I mean the higher price after I cancel my room the first time, which would be optimal. But there is just no reason in the world you will honor your own prices. So, I mean, John, does that seem to you like it's probably like roughly fair? Hey, give me the deal you agreed to?
Yeah, like I said, if the phone agent quoted you a price, that ought to be the price, Bill. I think you absolutely have a gripe for this. I don't think there's a lot of good options for you here because, again, I mean, I can't speak for the other guys on the trip. If you decide you're mad enough that we need to just cancel all our bookings and pick a different resort, we can talk it over with the other guys and we can do that. There's some screaming deals downtown, although there's one downtown property I won't recommend, and we'll get to that story in a second. But, uh, I don't know what to tell you other than I suspect our travel group would be with you if you decided, you know what, you're mad enough at MGM that they get a timeout, in which case I say, let's go stay downtown.
So the customer service failing, though, and even declining to respond,
Oh,
and
yeah.
totally ghosting me, that's just obscene. Like, and not even saying,
Yes.
dear Bill, we've acknowledged your message. We're sorry to interrupt. There's nothing we can do for you. That would be inadequate, but at least they would show they acknowledge I'm a person who exists. The next level would be, hey, we can't do anything, but we know it's been rough. Here's a coupon for a couple of drinks. The optimal response would be, hey, we're so sorry this has been rough. Here's the deal you booked in the first place and maybe a couple of drinks. But yeah, no, this is the failing to respond at all. That's just obscene.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. No argument for me at all. All right. Well, let's jump into the news. And speaking of hotels that have problems, Scott of Vital Vegas is reporting what he calls rumors, but he has actually talked to the vendors in question, is that Downtown Grand has stopped paying their vendors. And listeners, if you are not familiar with how business works, when you stop paying your vendors, your business is not very long for staying open. That's trying to hoard cash because you're circling the drain and you're about to close and you're trying to take as much of the bag with you as you lock the doors. So Downtown Grand seems to be in a bad way.
And that is a shame to hear because I enjoyed the Downtown Grand as a property. Also because I want, downtown, I want the Fremont Street experience to be as vital as possible. And while the Downtown Grand isn't directly on the Fremont Street experience, it's a block off. It absolutely supports that district. So yeah, no, that is in fact bad news. Folks, if you've got a reservation coming up at the Downtown Grand, because I trust Scott as a news source, have an alternate possibility of a place to stay.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, also, according to Scott at Vital Vegas, he broke news that TI, Treasure Island, is now planning to partner with Accor, which is a worldwide hotel operator that partners with a number of brands that, to be delicate, are underwhelming, including names no longer gracing Vegas, properties such as the SLS and the Delano. So on the one hand, the new TI partnership deal is not with an amazing firm, but on the other hand, I kind of like the fact that they've got any partnership deal at all because I love the TI as a property. They have to be hurting as the Mirage is converting into the Hard Rock, and they've essentially got a giant construction zone to their south. So I don't know, John, that strikes me as mostly pretty good news. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think at this point, if you decide to rage quit MGM, at least for this trip, maybe we kick the tires on TI. Like I said, they got to do something because not having that walkable partner. For listeners who don't know, TI and Mirage were once built and owned by Steve Wynn and built as sister properties. And even though they've been on separate ownership for quite a while, there's a symbiotic relationship that happens there. And I do think TI's problems are not just that travel in downtown travel to the Strip is down overall, which absolutely hurts TI because everybody's hurting. But I think for TI, this is a double whammy because their sister property, even if under new ownership, is closed for renovation for a number of years. So yeah, if this can bring a few extra people into TI or float them some cash to get them through, I think that's a very welcome thing for them because I don't want TI to wind up in Downtown Grand's position.
Absolutely. Well, John, what's going on at the Red Rock?
Well, Scott also broke the news that Red Rock has had a great financial quarter, and this just shows that local facing casinos are weathering the storm well, which once again points out that the issue in Vegas isn't that Americans don't have money to dine, drink, and gamble. It's that Americans don't seem to want to do it in Vegas, and neither do international tourists, because the local centered places are doing just fine. Thank you very much.
So, John, is Red Rock one of those properties that has the really great like late night snacks menu?
No, you're thinking of South Point, and I do want to check out South Point at this trip. If we do remain on the Mandalay complex with the W, I'm more than happy to entertain getting in an Uber and going down to South Point. But there are some great restaurants, including a phenomenal Thai place, or so I hear at Red Rock, and it is a location I would like to check out at some point in our Vegas travels.
Well, then maybe we will. Speaking of places worth checking out and snacks, and this must have been what made me think of it, with one last story stolen from Scott. And folks, we promised to move on to other news stories with our sources with our next story. But Chef Driven Smash Burger NADC Burger, or Not a Damn Chance Burger, is open as a pop-up in the old Suns Out Buns Out location at Resorts World, which I love because I like Suns Out Buns Out. But more to the point, it's a great location, and I really want Resorts World to make it, so I'm glad that there is something there. So, John, what kind of restaurant, what kind of hook would it make to take you actually go into Resorts World at some point?
Just the opportunity. It's just normally when I go to Vegas, I'm not that far up on the strip. I'm more than happy to explore Resorts World. I just haven't had the chance to do that. And the thing about Resorts World, Fontainebleau, Sahara, and even ye old dreaded nasty circus tent is that they are so forever far from all the other things on the strip. But we plan to go to Atomic Golf our first night in Vegas. I don't know if I want to eat at Resorts World after Atomic Golf. I think I'd like to check out the Peppermill. But if we all decide to go be degenerate gamblers and I can go drop a $20 bill in a video poker machine and maybe grab a late night snack, you could talk me into going into the building.
Outstanding. Well, speaking of other burger type joints, talk to us about our next story, John.
So Eater Vegas's reporter Janet Carell says that Naughty Patty, the smash burger joint at Cosmo's Block 16 Food Hall, which, by the way, Scott at Valado Vegas is the one that broke that it was coming. Well, Eater Vegas says it is now here. It opened on July 28th. It is sort of a replacement for the burger joint Holstein's, which also has a cult following. It's been gone from Cosmo for quite a while, but don't worry, Holstein's fans. They're in the Arts District, so you can get your fix of Holstein's in the Arts District. Meanwhile, I love the Block 16 Food Hall, so I'm glad they have a burger joint to help anchor that space. Although, if I'm back at Block 16, I probably skip the burger, because, Bill, you need to hear me. The sandwiches at Lardo, you need a sandwich, my friend. Those are not just your normal sandwiches. That ain't Subway. You need a porchetta. I'm just telling you.
I don't believe you, John, because you are skinny and dainty, and I don't think you have the slightest idea what constitutes good food.
And that, listeners, is called irony.
Oh, speaking of irony, Janet also, I don't know that irony is the right thing, but something along those lines. Janet also shared that Dave's Hot Chicken is opening up at Terminal D at the airport without necessarily upgrading the airline lavatories for the people who will be departing from Vegas after having had Dave's Hot Chicken. And I'm not going to lie, John, I'm actually pretty excited about a new restaurant at the airport. I like Dave's Hot Chicken. Sometimes the airport needs additional things, and that's the level of cuisine I want when I'm at the airport waiting for a departing flight. Also, we've talked about making trips to Vegas as our respective children turn 21. So when my oldest kid, Edwin, turns 21, he is a huge Dave's Hot Chicken fan. Son, if you're listening to this, I would love to hear from you about whether or not you want that particular restaurant or to go into town for something else. But yeah, there's a new Dave's Hot Chicken coming to the airport.
I just don't want to sit next to whichever passenger signed the waiver to eat the hottest sandwich available at that menu. This seems like not the right meal for a travel day. I sort of feel like you should eat Dave's when you're close to home waters, if you catch my drift. All right. According to, sorry, my bad. All right. According to Travel and Leisure, MGM Grand is amidst a $300 million renovation to their rooms and suites. The first of those rooms are available to book now, and the rest will be ready at the end of the year. And in fact, Travel Ruby, she of YouTube fame, has already posted a video showing off one of the new Grand King rooms, along with a few other new facilities on the property, including Netflix Eats and the new Party Day Club pool, which Bill and I are way too frickin' old to go swim at.
Yeah, but we're both good looking enough, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Very good. I actually kind of want to go check out the MGM Grand, though, after they finish this renovation, because I've always liked that property, but the rooms, I mean, they were a little tired, they were a little dated, so this actually makes a difference for me, and the MGM Grand may be a place we go soon. Unfortunately, it's not a good option for this trip, because it's, again, in the MLive ecosphere, and we know they don't answer their mail or honor their deals.
Or check their email, or answer the phone, or, yeah, it's an issue.
Any of the things. Well, in places which do seem able to handle their stuff, according to CNBC, the Las Vegas Sphere is soon going to screen 1939's The Wizard of Oz in a new immersive film experience, and the project's going to place viewers inside the world of Oz using the Sphere's 160,000 square foot wraparound screen. The film is going to play in 16K resolution, which I can't quite get my head around, with full spatial audio using 167,000 speakers and haptic seating, according to a June press release. And John, I'm not going to lie, I remember watching The Wizard of Oz in the 70s or 80s, and I was scared enough then. Little 5-8-year-old me was scared enough then. But if you put me in haptic seating where I can feel the tornado coming, I think adult me loses my cool. Is that something you have any interest in seeing?
Yes, I do. I want to see that. But also, speaking of feeling the tornado coming, I feel like we should have put the Dave's Hot Chicken story after that, because there might be a tornado in your seat then. But yeah, Bill, I absolutely want to see The Wizard of Oz. Here's what I didn't want to see. Twitter user Chris Holmes, who I don't know if he's a big Vegas influencer, I just started following him because of this tweet, which I picked up on a retweet. He reported that the love sign of the Venetian Palazzo has been unceremoniously yanked out of its spot so that they could put up an ad for The Wizard of Oz. And listen, I get it. They need to promote because The Wizard of Oz coming to the Sphere is cool. But the love sign, my wife and I have pictures in front of that sign. It's a thing that people go do. Bad Venetian, bad Palazzo. Listen, Vegas, you need stuff that makes us want to come to your property. Quit taking away the cool free stuff that makes us walk in your building and do the unfree stuff. My wife and I literally stayed at the Palazzo one time simply because she wanted that photo op. Guess what? We won't stay there again just for that.
Yeah. Well, and so Vegas is there to make money. Cool. Great. God bless. I hope you make lots and lots of money. Every property there, I hope lots of people make lots of money. And sure, you're going to want to advertise something like The Wizard of Oz. But that love sign at the Venetian Palazzo, it's not like that it's the fountains at Bellagio, which are really expensive to maintain, took a lot of real estate, and people didn't even have to come into the property. It was a very small piece of real estate. People had to physically come into your property, and almost all of those people are going to buy a cup of coffee, a drink, a meal, or in you and Lori's case, we're going to have stayed there. So yeah, I think that was a mistake, and it's that kind of thinking that leads to our next news story, because according to Newsweek, Las Vegas hotel occupancy was down 17% in early June to a total of 66.7%, which means for most of the month, 1 room out of 3 was empty. And that might not be true on high days or on Saturdays, but that meant some days it was even worse than that. Yeah, John, I think that the value proposition in Vegas has changed just at the point where the economy has changed enough that people are sensitive to it. But at least there aren't any stories coming out of Vegas about really obscene charges people are having to pay. Right, John?
And in Vegas WTF news, View from the Wings is reporting that a visitor at the Paris Las Vegas was charged $50 frickin' dollars for the grand sin of unplugging a cord in the wall on the desk in the hotel room because there were no other power ports at the desk, and she, sitting at a desk, wanted to plug in her laptop, which I know is crazy. Who in the world would want to plug in a computer at a desk? Nobody puts a computer on a desk, Bill. It's the wackiest thing I've ever heard of. This reminds me of a story. In a former section of my life, I was a picture framer, and I worked for several art galleries. And I remember working for one art gallery where a new owner decided that we were going to cut all the affordable pre-framed art out of our inventory and only sell high-end stuff. And we were going to jack up the prices for custom framing when we had been a volume, affordable custom frame shop, so you could get your diploma, your family picture, whatever. Even on one regrettable occasion, somebody had their high school students' championship Speedo put into a shadow box that yours truly had to sew to a mat board. What a rough day at work. And my boss told me we're doing all these changes because I would rather make $1,000 sale than $1,000 sales. And I tried to explain to that boss, yeah, but there's a lot more people with $100 to spend than there are people with $1,000 to spend. And sooner or later, you run out of $1,000 clients. Well, he and I didn't see eye to eye, and it wasn't long before I decided to take my skill set to another art gallery. And lo and behold, about 6 weeks after I walked out that job, he was out of business. Because guess what? There's only so many high-end customers. I don't think these Las Vegas properties, particularly Caesars MGM, Resorts World, and Fontainebleau, have embraced the fact that you are better in the long run with $1,000 customers than $1,000 customer. Because $1,000 customers will spread by word of mouth and become 15 and 20 and 30. But sooner or later, you run out of $1,000 customers. This kind of price gouging is going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg.
Well, and in addition to the basic price gouging, I get the fact that the Paris, which is a Caesars property, it's not an M-Life property, the Paris covered their legal basis by having a sign in small type away in the room from the place where the person was going to be taking the action of unplugging. In addition to the fact that the charge should never have been there, man, that seems awfully shady as a way to have handled it.
It's not just shady, it's downright deceptive. It is logical for any hotel room provider to assume that customers will want a power plug next to a desk. Setting up that desk in such a way that you can ding somebody for $50 for doing what you logically assume somebody would naturally do is not just shady, it is downright deceptive. It is downright predatory. And I'm not going to be nice about it.
No.
And I've only stayed at a Caesars property once. So if Caesars wants to ban me, go ahead. But I will not stay at a Caesars property so long as they're doing crap like this, because you can't keep treating customers this way and expect to still have customers in the long run. And that's what they're overlooking. They are so convinced. Now, I think this goes to your story about the W. These big-time operators are so convinced that there's enough millionaires out there to fill up their hotels that they don't have to cater to middle-class and upper-middle-class clients because they're going to cater to the rich and fabulous. Well, guess what? There's only so many rich and fabulous, and if you haven't paid attention to the American economy, there ain't as many as you think there are. There's a whole lot of us that do have some money to spend, and we'd like to spend it with you, Las Vegas, but you got to play ball with us and meet us in the middle. We know the house always wins, but let us feel like we're getting a deal. Let us feel like you're treating us with respect. Let us feel like our money matters to you, and we'll keep coming. But if you don't, this is going to wind up being, I don't know, Dine, Drink, Boise. No, I'm just kidding. We're not doing that. But you get my point. Rant mode over.
But it was a fair rant. Well, John, does that wrap us up for tonight?
I think it does, and I think listeners have had enough of me hemming and hawing. Bill, why don't you tell everybody what's coming up on YouTube and where else they can find our content?
So on the Dine Drink Vegas YouTube channel, we just released a video about my 5 favorite steakhouses in Vegas where John didn't even disagree all that much. We also have some more coming up on my last stay at the Mandalay Bay, and should fairly soon have something on the W if, we eventually come to a fair room price. But at Dine Drink Vegas, we have short and focused videos to help you plan your next trip. Think of it as the photos of the internet. On Dine Drink Travel, we also have reviews of airports, airline executive lounges, and the air travel seats you will be in. And you can find us on essentially every social media platform at Dine Drink Travel, where I'm probably arguing with John, which means, John, where can they find you to see our argument?
I am at Dine Drink John. Would love to talk to you about anything Vegas related, alcohol related, coffee related, or how the Dallas Cowboys are going to find new and creative ways to break my heart this season. We thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. If you have a friend planning their next trip to Las Vegas, please share our podcast with them. If you have an arch enemy that hates listening to old fat white Southern guys talk about things for minutes and minutes on end, share it with them too. Either way, you're helping us build an audience so that we can keep bringing you great travel content. We will catch you on the next episode, and until then, thanks for listening and happy travels.